Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into the latest shocking updates from the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia, a conflict that continues to reshape global politics, economics, and military strategy. What's happening right now on the front lines, and how are both nations adjusting their tactics as the war enters yet another critical phase? Let's break down what you need to know. Over the past few weeks, Ukraine has made several bold moves that have caught international attention. Despite facing significant logistical challenges and a long, grueling conflict, Ukrainian forces continue to strike deep into Russian-held territory. New drone and missile attacks have targeted supply depots, command centers, and even infrastructure inside Russia's borders. These operations have been described by analysts as some of the most daring actions of the war so far. At the same time, Russia is intensifying its own offensives in the east and south. Moscow has deployed additional troops and armored vehicles to push back Ukrainian advances, especially around the Donetsk and Zaporizhia regions. Russian state media claims that its forces have gained ground, but satellite imagery and independent reports tell a more complex story, one of heavy losses and fierce resistance from Ukrainian defenders. One of the most shocking developments involves the massive escalation of drone warfare. Both sides are now relying heavily on drones, not just for surveillance, but for precision strikes. Ukraine's long-range drone attacks have reached deep into Russian territory, including strikes near oil refineries and military bases. Russia has responded with waves of Shahd drones and cruise missiles aimed at Ukraine's power grid and major cities, leading to renewed blackouts and damage to civilian infrastructure. The humanitarian situation remains dire. Millions of Ukrainians continue to live under constant threat of bombardment, and winter is approaching fast. Cities like Kharkiv, Odessa, and Dnipro are preparing for another season of potential energy shortages, while volunteers work around the clock to provide heating supplies, generators, and medical aid. Meanwhile, in Russia, public sentiment is also shifting as the war drags on. Reports suggest increasing frustration among Russian families over the government's handling of mobilization and the lack of clear progress on the battlefield. Western nations are once again ramping up their support for Ukraine. The United States recently approved another major aid package that includes advanced air defense systems, ammunition, and armored vehicles. European countries are also stepping up, with Germany and the UK pledging to send long-range missiles and additional tanks. However, this renewed wave of assistance has drawn sharp warnings from Moscow, with Russian officials threatening unpredictable consequences if Western weapons are used to strike targets deep inside Russia. The political tension is rising beyond the battlefield. Inside Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky continues to call for unity and resilience, emphasizing that every inch of Ukrainian soil must be defended. But there are growing concerns about war fatigue and economic pressure. Inflation, rebuilding costs, and the constant need for defense funding are taking their toll on the country's economy. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin has tightened his control over political institutions and media narratives, but cracks are beginning to appear within his circle of influence as the war's costs mount. Perhaps the most shocking revelation of recent weeks comes from intelligence leaks and independent reports suggesting that Russia may be facing severe shortages in ammunition and high-tech weaponry. Western sanctions have cut off much of Moscow's access to key components needed for advanced systems. This shortage has forced Russia to turn to countries like Iran and North Korea for military supplies, something the Kremlin once denied but now appears increasingly undeniable. Ukraine, on the other hand, is pushing innovation to its limits. Engineers and military developers are creating domestically produced drones and missiles that can rival imported systems. New tactics are being tested every week, combining Western technology with local ingenuity. The result is a faster, more adaptive fighting force capable of striking targets that were once considered unreachable. In the diplomatic arena, discussions about possible peace talks have resurfaced, but both sides remain firmly entrenched in their positions. Kiev insists that any negotiations must include the complete withdrawal of Russian troops and the restoration of its 1991 borders. Moscow, meanwhile, continues to demand recognition of the territories it has annexed. The international community, including the United Nations, has expressed growing concern over the war's global impact, particularly on food security and energy prices. One of the biggest global ripple effects of this war continues to be the energy crisis in Europe. As winter approaches, European countries are scrambling to secure alternative energy sources to replace Russian gas. This shift has reshaped global energy routes, with nations from the Middle East to the United States playing larger roles in filling the gap. It's also creating new political alliances and tensions as energy dependence becomes a weapon of influence. On the battlefield, Ukrainian morale remains high despite the heavy toll. The spirit of resistance and the sense of defending national identity continue to unite the country. Soldiers and civilians alike are finding ways to adapt from trench fortifications to digital warfare coordination. Reports from the front show that Ukrainian troops are better equipped and more organized than at any point earlier in the war. Russia, however, remains formidable. Its vast reserves, industrial capacity, and nuclear arsenal ensure that the conflict will not end easily. Analysts warn that as the war becomes more unpredictable, the risk of escalation, whether accidental or deliberate, is growing. Cyber attacks, misinformation campaigns, and proxy conflicts in other regions could all become extensions of this ongoing struggle. The shocking reality is that after more than 2 years of fighting, there is still no clear end in sight. Each side continues to adapt, experiment, and dig in deeper. The human cost is staggering, the political stakes immense, and the potential consequences global. From military strategies to international sanctions, every decision made now will shape the next decade of global security. As we move forward, the world is watching closely. What happens next in Ukraine will not just determine the fate of two nations, it will redefine the balance of power for generations to come. The courage, the destruction, and the relentless struggle of this war have already changed history. And with each new development, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The story of this conflict is far from over. Thank you for watching. And if you want to stay updated on every major event and hidden detail of this war, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's much more to uncover in the days ahead, and we'll be right here breaking it down for you.